Welcome to my paint along video of Lake Moraine in Canada. So the first thing we'll be doing is putting in the sky, and these are white fluffy clouds, and you're just going around the shape of the clouds with this cerulean blue, and then soften the edges so that there's not too many hard edges around those clouds. And then to shape the clouds themselves, mix some burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and that will give you a nice gray. But wet the area and then just drop that in. It's a wet into wet approach. So very, very little detail when it comes to the clouds. When it comes to clouds, I always say less is more. Okay, now going into these rugged peaks in the Canadian Rockies, I'm looking for the area of the warm parts of the mountain that are cast by the sun. It's always going to be a little warmer. And so these beautiful peaks have so many different colors. And I like these colors to just blend together while it's still wet. Now I'm being very careful to go around these areas of snow. Leave that white. I won't be touching that at all. And drop in a little bit of blue with that, the cool colors. And again, go around that white area where the snow is. So we're just establishing kind of the shape of these mountains at this point. This is the first pass of the layering of these colors. So it's very light. Don't use a lot of pigment at all. There's more water than pigment. Especially with mountains, because you can really overdo mountains. You want the mountains to be in the background and pushed back. But at the same time, you want to see the different colors blend into each other to give some interest. But the main thing is not too much pigment. That's an important thing for mountains. Now I'm going into some line work. As the paint is drying, I'm going in a little bit darker with blue and some reds. That will push those colors back further just by putting some of those reds in. Cadmium red is a good color for that. It just dumbs down a color every time. And at the same time, it can intensify a color. But in this case, if you want the mountains to move away from you, put a little cadmium in with the blue. But again, keep it very wet. More water than pigment. I'm just establishing some of the line work in this as it dries, and I'm going over the next pass. I'm putting in line work to give that ruggedness of the mountain peaks. Okay, now I'm really looking for my light source at this point. I've got those warm colors in to begin with, but now I want to see where is that light shining, what direction. And in this case, it's coming from the left. So those shadow colors are going to be coming from the right. little bit of a combination of yellow ochre and sap green, and a tiny bit of cadmium is how I got that color. Again, that cadmium is helping push those trees in the background. Those are a mountain just full of trees right there. But you can't see every little one of those trees. You just know they're trees. And so it's basically just a shape of trees. When I say shape of trees, I mean the whole mountain is kind of a shape. And leave some sparklies in there, some white areas that you can come back over if you need to. While my paint is green still on my brush, I'm going to indicate where that reflection is going in the water. And I want that to just repeat what I see in the angle of those trees. But I'm adding a little bit more blue. Because not only is it a reflection of the trees, it's actually, the color is a reflection of the sky. So while that's wet, I'm just adding more and more of that green and letting that fuse into it. I'll go over that in another pass after that's dry. But a lighter blue that I'm working on right now, I'm going around those boats. I want those boats to be the part of the center of interest. The mountain peaks are too. So that light color of blue just going around the boats. Now I'm establishing where I want those, the beginning of those trees. And there's some warm colors in there, but not so warm that it's going to make it pop forward. So I've put some burnt sienna in there just for that rusty look, just to the base of those trees. But if I need to push it back further, I add some of that that red that we talked about before. That pushes it back. Just a light blue against those canoes. Okay, now with a dry brush, I'm just going around little areas of those trees, just establishing the shape of the whole area of trees. Now I'm mixing in sap green and ultramarine blue with that, and leaving some little holes as I'm designing those little trees. It's not just one big thing of shape of trees. It's little holes in between. Now that rusty color I dropped in with those trees, just give it some dimension and interest. And I'll be going over that color, but it will peek through. So that's just the first pass. Really light colors. It's more pigment this time because you've used a dry brush to get those ends of the trees. But we'll be going over those trees again to give a lot more detail and dimension. Okay, this is part of the reflection of in the lake from those trees. It's really just a mirror of what the trees are up against the mountains. And that dock that you see is just yellow ochre mixed with a little bit of burnt sienna. And that's a wet into wet. Very subtle. And you can lift that out just a little bit. It might be a little intense for that walkway. And now those trees are starting to dry. So I'm coming back in the trees with a darker green. There's a little bit of blue mixed with that green. I'm getting in some of the foliage that's around that one little red canoe. And this is what I call calligraphy in the trees. And use paint, just the tip of your paintbrush to get the ends of those trees. Almost flick it at the very end. And again, leaving a little bit of those holes in between. That's the sun shining through or bouncing off. But you can see the sky through some of those trees too. And then that will say, oh, this is a tree. It's not just a shape. And you don't paint every little tiny tree. It's just that indication of a whole set of trees. Now the fun part where you get to paint these canoes, these bright canoes. When you go to Lake Moraine, you'll always see these canoes out there. It's fun to take a little canoe ride around this lake. And they're all very colorful, different colors, which enhances the whole scene with these bright colored canoes. And again, you're just starting with one pass of light color and then go over it again with the same color just to make it darker. But each layer has to dry. And I'm just putting the reflection in there at the same time that I'm painting the canoe. So while that's drying, the canoe, I'm just going back and fiddling with those trees a little bit more and a little bit more intensity on the reflection of the trees in the background in the water. I like that one blue boat where it's at because it brings your eye where it's supposed to be, right in the center. Then that red boat takes your eye up and around the mountain peaks down to the trees and back to that yellow boat. Part of the design. A little bit more detail on that yellow canoe. Let's give paying attention to the lines of each one of those are separated, and it takes fine line work in those canoes to make those not look overworked. And so the way to do that is several passes, not too much water, not too much paint. While that's drying, I'm going back over the trees and give them a little bit more contrast here and there. Actually, I'm just fiddling. Don't fiddle too much with this. I have a tendency to fiddle. Now I'm just lifting out a little bit in that area to make those bushes by that red boat stand out. And the rocks are just a lot of gray colors. And frame those up with little circles, the rocks. Just touching up these canoes just a little bit. Get a chance, go up to Lake Moraine sometime and just sit there on the dock and paint those beautiful mountains. They are spectacular. I hope you've enjoyed this little painting, and you can rewind this and go over it several times if you want to. But it's fun to paint the Canadian Rockies. Keep painting.